Round 5 of the season is over, and Miami provided some excellent Formula 1 racing. An incredibly close qualifying session meant the start grid was messed up a bit. The teams actually ran different tyre strategies, and the DRS changes weren't nearly as detrimental as the drivers warned. All in all, Miami was far better than expected, unless you were Lewis Hamilton, that is. A terrible qualifying session, followed by some team orders in the race, left the 7-time world champion demanding more from his team. Are Hamilton and Russell on a collision course for a head-to-head battle this season? And if the W14 is so awful, how did Hamilton go from 13th to 6th? Stick around as we check out Mercedes Miami Grand Prix weekend. Before we deep dive into Mercedes weekend, I want to get your opinions on the Miami Grand Prix. It was only the 14th ever Formula 1 Grand Prix to not have any DNFs. There were no red flags, no safety cars, barely anyone went off track either. Nonetheless, the racing was thrilling. The much spoken about DRS changes didn't stop the drivers overtaking. I thought the track looked amazing. I know the pre-race stuff was a farce, but once the cars actually hit the track, I thought it was an incredible weekend, and exactly what I wanted after Baku. Do you agree? Someone who probably loved the race as much as me is George Russell. Starting from 6th, he drove an excellent race to finish 4th, probably the best finish that Mercedes can realistically hope for most weekends at the moment. He battled his way past Carlos Sainz and drove an excellent race, eventually finishing pretty comfortably between Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz. Before the race, Lewis Hamilton was probably expecting far worse than he got. His tyre strategy matched that of Max Verstappen and was very clearly the better option on the day. Starting on the hard, going long and then switching to the medium allowed Max to go from 9th to a comfortable 1st, and it helped Lewis make a charge through the field before eventually finishing 6th. The brand new tarmac in the Hard Rock Stadium car park meant the track surface was very abrasive early in the race. Over time, rubber started building up on the surface, helping the tyres stick to the track rather than sliding over it. This meant that early in the race, all the cars that started on the medium tyre wore through their tyres very quickly. The more resistant but theoretically slower hard tyres lasted much better, helping Hamilton set consistently good lap times, quickly becoming quicker than the cars that started on the medium. As the race went on, the fuel loads in the cars became lighter, the track became covered in rubber and far grippier, and by the time that Hamilton and Verstappen were on the medium tyre, they were way quicker than everyone else. So despite a terrible Friday and Saturday, the W14 proved a much more competitive beast over a race distance. Speaking after the race, Hamilton said he'd felt the car coming to life under him as the laps ticked by. I don't really know about the strategy. I don't know if that was optimum or whether it could have been worse, he told Sky F1 when asked about how Mercedes approached the Grand Prix. The strategy was definitely the right one, though none of the teams knew that before the race started. It was definitely difficult to start just being in a DRS train with a bunch of cars, and trying to get past the Williams, which is so quick on the straight, was not so easy. But eventually, I was able to start making headway. And then, once I'd done the stop and I got back out on the medium, is when I was able to really start to push. The car came a bit alive midway through the race, and I think to get from 13th to 6th, I'm pretty happy with that. Considering just how bad the Mercedes car had appeared earlier in the weekend, I would be ecstatic if I were him. Mercedes had an excellent first free practice, finishing 1st and 2nd on the timing sheets. But as the more competitive practice sessions began, they got a little found out. 7th and 15th in FP2 was followed by a 10th and 13th in FP3, before Hamilton's disastrous qualifying left them 6th and 13th on the grid. Lewis's finishing position meant he was positive about the weekend at the end of the race. Unfortunately, we started so far behind, but I enjoyed the race. I had a lot of fun just making my way through. It's nice to be able to have a battle with people and good points for the team, so a big thank you to the team again this weekend for just keeping their head down and continuing to push, even though we aren't where we want to be. There's still great morale within the team. Not everything about the Mercedes weekend was positive for Lewis Hamilton. The 7-time world champion spent years profiting from team order calls as he dominated the sport. Since the change in technical regulations in 2022 and George Russell's arrival at the team, Mercedes haven't been in a position to let either of their drivers become the lead driver. In 2022, Russell showed why he was so highly rated by Mercedes, finishing 4th in the championship, 35 points ahead of his teammate, and with the team's only race win. Nonetheless, Lewis isn't used to being told to get out of the way for his teammates, and you could hear how disappointed he was at the message asking him to move aside. We have George 1.1 behind, Hamilton was told by his engineer. We aren't racing him, we're racing Esteban Ocon, so let's not hold each other up. Hamilton snapped, he can go by, but I'm not backing off though. Hamilton did let his teammate through. It was still early days in the race, and considering the tyre difference, it was unlikely he would have been able to hold Russell off for very long anyway. The two were on opposing tyre strategies as well, so it isn't surprising Mercedes asked him to move aside. That doesn't mean he'll be happy about it though, and the annoyance in his voice when he said he would let George pass was unmissable. Mercedes team principal Wolff insisted that he did not expect any issue from requesting that Hamilton prioritised Russell in that moment. No, absolutely not. George was a stop ahead, Wolff said. To see two teammates, both on very good levels, they're both so straightforward. That is good at such a difficult moment. The subject of relationship between teammates has continually cropped up this season, as Red Bull's Max Verstappen battles Sergio Perez with the F1 title at stake. Christian Horner even teased Wolff that Red Bull were navigating that awkwardness better than Mercedes did when they had Hamilton and Nico Rosberg on top. But Mercedes are in a very different place this season, and Wolff was positive about how Lewis's race went. The car was good today. From P13, it's pretty difficult if you start on the same strategy as everyone else to pass. Therefore, we went with hards. Then we saw others had thought the same. Considering the strategy hope that we had, that nobody would start on the hards, was diminished, he drove a great race. Toto has been employing every ounce of flattery he can muster recently to try and convince his star driver to sign a new contract. The belief in the sport at the moment is that if Mercedes can make a competitive car, Lewis will stay on. If they can't though, there's a good chance he leaves the sport at the end of the year, when his contract is up. It will have hurt Toto to hear his strategy team use team orders to get Lewis out of the way for George. Wolff doesn't want to lose Lewis, and upsetting him by moving him out of the way for his teammate won't help. If Mercedes are set on keeping Hamilton around for the future though, it is their car they need to worry about. After a promising Australian Grand Prix, Mercedes have struggled to continue moving forwards. The track at Albert Park clearly suited the W14, because since then they've slotted back in behind the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, and look unable to challenge him on the racetrack. The next step for Mercedes is to get to Imola and add upgrades to the car. For the next race at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, Mercedes is introducing a major update, which will include changes to the sidepod, floor and front suspension. And while the team hopes that the new package will deliver a step forward in form, more critical, reckons boss Toto Wolff, is the way that the changes should help deliver some answers about the faults in the current car. Wolff is not expecting a dramatic change in fortunes from Imola, but believes the knowledge gained could prove significant for the long term. We need to manage our own expectations, because we're bringing an update package that's going to consist of new suspension parts, and bodywork and some other things, he said. Toto has embarrassed himself enough times recently by making bold claims about Mercedes' car and upgrades, and he's clearly learnt his lesson. But I've never, in my 15 years in Formula 1, seen a silver bullet being introduced, where suddenly you unlock half a second of performance. So I very much doubt that this is going to happen here. It's true that there aren't any silver bullets in Formula 1, but Mercedes are bringing a plethora of upgrades, which together could make a silver magazine. Is that a phrase that works? I'm not sure, but hopefully you get the idea. The suite of upgrades they're bringing to the car could help them make a huge stride in Imola, not just in their car pace, but in their attempts to re-sign Lewis Hamilton. What do you think of Mercedes' weekend? Do you think Lewis and George could be battling each other this season? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.